Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So hello everyone, and welcome to Dharma Basics. My name is Travis. I facilitate this group. So for tonight, I was considering doing the 5 recollections. If y'all would like to do that, you can let me know if that sounds good to you over in the chat over here. I had mentioned, briefly touched on the 5 recollections last week. The 5 recollections being meditation that's geared towards some of the ways, the most common ways in which we lie to ourselves. So it's, I am subject to aging, I am subject to illness, I am subject to death. I will inevitably grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me, and I am the owner of my actions. Those are the recollections. If y'all would like to do a meditation on the recollections, we can. If you're not feeling up to that tonight, we can just do some standard breath meditation. Marisa, it's as if you knew I'd be here tonight. I did have a bit of a feeling you might. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and do the recollections. So basically, the way that these recollections work is we're noticing the kind of correlation connection. It's similar in a sense to the way that we approach forgiveness meditation. We're recognizing, becoming aware of the correlation between stating a phrase that we might find unpleasant and the way that the body will tense up around that phrase, almost like it's trying to resist or suppress it or not acknowledge it, especially when it's a phrase that's objectively true. Like there's nothing untruthful about I am subject to aging will happen. So it's something that, if it's something we don't like to think about, it's something the body will tensen up. If we don't like thinking about the gray hairs or the wrinkles or the aches and pains, maybe we'll tense up. And the same thing with illness, with death, with separation. So what we're working on here is we'll state a phrase in the mind, and we'll kind of, this is a little more hands-on than the forgiveness meditation, where we kind of state the phrase and allow the forgiveness to happen. With this, we state the phrase and try to use some visual anchors as well. With any of these, we can imagine as if there's a mirror in front of us, and we can imagine these things happening. If that's a little too intense for you, you don't have to. But it's all about giving rise to that feeling of resistance, that feeling of discomfort, and then being able to physically soften into it. And when we can tackle these recollections, certain aspects of life can become a lot easier. We don't hold on to things as intensely. Personally, I don't feel as attacked by what maybe someone says or something that happens to me when I keep these things in mind. And my time here is limited, and I don't want to waste it in unskillful mind states. I don't want to waste it staying in unpleasant thought worlds. So, yeah. With that, we'll get started. If at any point the meditation becomes overwhelming at all, you can just return to the breath. That's okay, that's fine. And then if you feel comfortable, you can dive back into the recollections. So with that, we will get started. I don't have the bell tonight, I forgot to grab it, but we can practice that as well. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Just noticing if we're holding any tension in the forehead or the shoulders. Let's see if we can consciously relax it all the way through the in-breath and all the way through the out-breath. With the forehead and the shoulders relaxed. Also softening the eyes and unclenching the jaw. moving down into the chest and stomach. Allowing the stomach to soften and the chest to expand. Dissolving any tension or tightness with each breath. And with this tension relaxed, we can now move on to the recollections. It's always important when doing any kind of meditation that may give rise to tension that we start by priming the canvas like this, setting ourselves up for success. So now we can kind of allow our awareness to rest in the heart and allow the breath to fade into the background. It's not the focus anymore. You can begin to call to mind and work with the first recollection. Thinking, I am subject to aging. Aging is a natural part of life. I'll grow older and wrinkled and gray. Just noticing how the heart responds to this, how the body responds to it. If it gives rise to tension, you can consciously relax it. Once it's relaxed, you can return to the recollection. Simply repeating this process. Recognize that the mind has wandered. Release the distraction and return to this recollection. I am subject to aging. Aging is natural. I'll grow older and wrinkled and gray. My faculties will fade. Again, noticing tension and softening it. You may even find it helpful to maintain a gentle smile. Softening into this recollection one last time. And then moving on to the second recollection. I am subject to illness. Illness is a natural part of life. Whatever level of health I have in this moment will not last forever. Eventually, I will grow ill. Noticing the body's resistance to this observation and relaxing it, settling back into the heart. I am subject to illness. Illness is natural. I am subject to illness. Illness is natural. Whatever level of health I have in this moment will not last forever. Eventually it will decline. Again, maintaining that gentle smile if you find it useful. Not only with your mouth, but with your eyes as well. Moving on from this recollection, onto the third recollection. I am subject to death. Death is a natural part of life. This body will not continue forever. Eventually it will fall apart. Noticing if this gives rise to tension and consciously relaxing it. Reminding yourself there's nothing negative about reflecting on the inevitability of death. It's simply the way things are. Whatever time we have left is the time we have left. Let's make the most use of it. Noticing a tension response and relaxing into it. And setting aside this recollection of death and moving on to the fourth recollection. Recentering our awareness in the chest, aware of sensations in the chest. Working with the fourth recollection. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. Things that I find so important right now, so obsessively important right now, maybe in a day, a week, a year, 5 years, they'll hardly be relevant anymore. I will grow different from them, separate from those desires. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. Whether through my own changing interests or the whims of time, much of what I hold dear will become separate from me. Noticing resistance to this thought, physical resistance, and softening into it, relaxing the heart space. Moving on to the last recollection. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions. I live dependent on my actions. Whatever I do, skillful or unskillful, to that will I fall heir. My actions have consequences, even if I don't get caught. Noticing any resistance and softening into it. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Really settling back into the body, Relaxing any leftover tension in the forehead and the shoulders. The stomach and the chest. And just slowly, when you're ready, you can open the eyes. Never in a rush to leave the meditation. Ding. So as always, if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them, I'd always love to hear it. If you found it insightful or challenging or difficult, or anything that it brought up for you, if you'd like to share. I found myself wanting to continue much longer than normal, which I would have done if it was like a breath meditation or something like that. But this can be a bit more intense. So I'll talk a little bit about the kind of the intentions behind this type of meditation. Talk a little bit more about these recollections. So the first thing that I'll say is that these recollections for myself have been tremendously helpful. Each recollection, the recollections as a whole, just kind of help with being overly attached to things, overly invested in things. I kind of all in general help with that, but each recollection also helps independent issues that are related with each recollection. And that's something that I found really helpful in my own practice. So the first recollection, the recollection on aging, the interesting thing is they all help with the same core concept of being too attached to things, being too invested in things, and kind of trying to lie to ourselves or convince ourselves otherwise, all this energy we invest in not looking at these things. And if we can free up that energy by acknowledging them, we have a lot more energy to invest towards more beneficial things. So what's interesting is that despite all of them helping towards the same thing, they also help with very different things. So with the recollection on aging, it helps with One, people who are afraid of the process of aging, are afraid of acknowledging the process of aging, or acknowledging maybe they're at a place in their life where their mental faculties have started to fade a bit, and they have a really hard time. They have a lot of pride wrapped up in that, and they have a hard time acknowledging that struggle, and that they're not alone in that struggle. That's a natural part of life. That's something that starts to happen. And then on the other side of the coin, the recollection on aging helps with what I like to call the arrogance of youth. When we're young and healthy and strong, there's kind of a part of us that thinks that we're never going to die. And because of that, like not consciously, but it's one of the premises that younger people tend to operate from without realizing it. And with that type of mentality leads to a lot of regrets, a lot of mistakes being made. Because with the arrogance of youth, you're living without consequence. But there's always consequence. So it helps in that respect. And it also helps with if someone's, if someone's very vain, someone's very wrapped up in their outward appearance, this recollection also helps remind them that that's very, very temporary. That's not going to last very long. So finding other more long-term sources of happiness could be a beneficial thing to do. And then when you move on to the next recollection, I am subject to illness. This is one that I found very helpful because it's one that's the most helpful time to do this is when you're sick. The recollection on illness is fantastic because when we're sick, we just want it to be over. But when we're sick, if we can sit with being sick, there's a lot of benefit to that. Not only that, it makes it easier to stay with the illness. It makes it less of something that we're fighting and more of something that we accept the existence of. And it also helps us when we're no longer sick to remind ourselves that whatever health we have in this moment will not last forever. So whenever we're not sick, there's a tendency to be kind of lazy about things, be kind of lax about things. And then as soon as we get sick, then our brain goes to, man, I wish I was better so I could start exercising again. Or, oh man, I wish I was healthy enough to go do that thing that I've been putting off for months, right? So it's only when we're sick, oftentimes, that we actually have the drive and the motivation that, oh, when I'm better, I want to do this. And then as soon as we're better, that motivation a lot of the times is gone. So this recollection on illness is really beneficial for motivation. Whatever good health we have in this moment will not last forever. Let's make use of it in this moment. Let's make the best use of it while we can. The recollection on death helps both with that similar thing, make the best use of the time that we have, this very brief time on this planet. And it also helps with the fear of death. There's a lot of people, myself included, who, not so much anymore, but who had an irrational fear of death, who was really worried about, oh, I could die at any moment. This is terrifying. The world is terrifying. And it's really just an irrational fear. In the first sense, it's irrational because it's inevitable. There's no point, like, fear biologically for us is an incentive to avoid dangerous things. But the fear of death in and of itself is illogical because that's not something that we can avoid. And we just completely drain ourselves of any energy that we have by trying to ignore that truth. Where on the opposite side, if we accept that truth, accept that reality, it's a lot easier to go about our day. It's a lot easier to enjoy each day. And that fear of death comes from trying to push it away. If we stop trying to push it away, that fear starts to dissolve, because the inevitability almost becomes a comfort. That may sound a little strange, but for those of us who maybe have had an irrational fear of death, that might make a bit of sense to you. And then the fourth recollection, I will grow separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. That one has a twofold meaning. And I think when we hear, I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me, when we hear that, we tend to think of it as one way. We tend to think of it as a very negative outlook. Like everything that I hold dear will be taken away from me. And while there is some of that sense of meaning to this word, to that phrase, the main focus point of it is many of the things that we find so alluring, find so dear and appealing, many of them aren't that important. That fancy car, that new phone, that particular person to look at you in that particular way. In a week, a month, a year, many of those things, even the next day, many of those things will lose a lot of their allure. They won't be as important as we're deluding ourselves into thinking they are in this moment. So instead of focusing on those things, we can focus on the things that actually give long-term benefit. We can focus on the things that many years from now we'll be glad we developed. This meditation practice, day by day, a year from now, that's something we can be pretty certain we won't regret taking the time to develop. It's something that builds upon itself, something that reinforces itself. So, yeah. It's always helpful to remind yourself when you're so wrapped up in things, to take a step back and look, will this really be that important to me a year from now? How about 2 years from now? How about 3? Just give ourselves some perspective, because we tend to look at life as if we're in the parade. We're like on the side of the parade and we're seeing one thing come after another, and we're getting really invested in each thing that comes up. But if we can watch the parade like a news report, we can watch the parade from a helicopter, when we can see the twists and turns, when we've distanced ourselves a bit, we can appreciate that the parade is continuing on, but we're not getting overly invested in any one aspect of it. And that's kind of the same thing here. And then, of course, the final one, I am the owner of my action, heir to my action, and live dependent on my actions. Whatever I do, skillful or unskillful, to that will I fall heir. That's, of course, the teaching on karma. Everything we think, everything we say, everything we do has an impact, either on the world around us or on the mind. Either on the mind and the world around us, or just on the mind. It always has an impact on the mind, no matter what. So taking ownership of our actions, acknowledging that our actions have consequences, and that we have the own ability within ourselves to improve through our actions. Our actions have the ability to shape our mind, and our mind has the ability to shape our life. And that all starts from taking ownership of our actions and cultivating skillful qualities and abandoning unskillful qualities. Yeah. I'll read a few of the. Roberto says, hi, Travis. Always enjoy the 5 remembrance. Thanks. Thank you, Roberto. Glad you're here tonight. Marisa, the first 4 recollections bring up emotion for me because we have no control over them. But the last one is almost empowering because it reminds me that I do have some control in my life. Absolutely. They're all valuable reminders, so thank you. So you brought up something interesting there. The first 4 recollections, we have no control over them. And that's true. They're inevitable parts of life. But the cool thing, and that you touched on there too, is through the 4th recollection, we realize that we have some degree of control over the first 4. With the 5th recollection, we have some degree of control over the first 4, because we have control over how we choose to react to the reality of the first 4. And that in itself is a massive insight to directly realize, to not just be told, but to see it through this practice, to recognize it through this practice. That the degree of control that we have over the things that are out of our control is we have control over the way that we can choose in which to react or respond to them. So yeah, there's comfort in acknowledging that there are things that are out of our control, and then in changing our relationship to them, where we go from a place of reactivity to a place of responsibility, responsiveness, responsibility. Yeah. Marisa, yes, I have never appreciated my health as much as right after I've been sick. Yeah. If I could just harness like a tenth of the motivation that I have when I'm sick to get things done to when I'm healthy, I'd be on top of the world. Yeah. So we are at time. We're a little past time. Sorry about that. With that, we will close with a dedication of merit. If comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from this meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or end, be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upekkha sahanga teya cetasa chaturi sambharatva viharati sambhabodaro bhavena sambhanamaro bhavena sambhasangharo bhavena sote hantu nirantaram. Good night, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your night. I'll see you next week.